When I was about 10, me and my friend were walking on a road near the river, when we spotted a tipped-over canoe. Having been in the fairly shallow river many times before, I didn't think twice about stepping in to push the canoe up and out. But just as I leveraged, the ground seemed to disappear. I was sucked down into a pit and tumbled around like a rag doll, only to be spit back out maybe 20 feet downstream and sucked under again. This happened over and over as my friend was running alongside, trying to get a hold of me. Luckily, I was being shot to the surface often enough to get a little air before going under. He eventually reached me with a branch, and I was able to get out. We didn't make a second attempt on the canoe and didn't tell anyone about the experience for fear of getting in trouble. But a couple of days later, we learned that an elderly couple had just drowned upstream. Their canoe tipped over, and the undertow took care of the rest. I was nearly killed trying to get the same canoe that had just killed 2 people. I worked as a CNA at a local nursing home that was on the edge of town, a country-like setting. I worked the night shift. It was easier than the day, and the nurses and assistants got along well. I was a baby at only 19. We would take turns running up the highway about 5 miles to a 24-hour convenience store, grab snacks, and go back. I would often volunteer to go since my apartment was right behind the store, and I knew the clerk. I enjoyed the ride, being away for a minute, even if it was 3 a.m. This was the 90s, and for some reason, I felt that it was safer than it is now, as you will most likely not find me out after dark alone now. While at the store, I noticed a man in a car looking at me. He absolutely gave me creeps at first glance, that gut feeling of something being wrong. I go inside, pick out everything, and return to the car. The guy is driving around the parking lot and pulls out before me. But as I get up to the highway a bit, as it's a straight shot from the nursing home to the store, he pulls over to the side and gets behind me. Once I pass, I'm completely aware that he's following me, and I have no cell phone with me. I get back to the nursing home, which has good lighting, and pull up to the front door. The guy has just turned in behind me, and I'm freaking out. I just want to get inside. We keep the doors locked, but a rug was in the front door for me. I run to the door, but as I stop to look at what this guy is doing, I look just in time to see him pull under a light and jump out. His pants are down, ready for him to expose himself to me. I was so upset by that brief encounter. I went into the bathroom and cried. I couldn't tell anyone right away for some reason. Then I got to thinking about him being outside when the smokers go, so I told everyone. I don't think we even called the police. I really wish I did. I was on a road trip with my best friend, traveling through some of the northern states of the US. My friend liked having a plan, and while we did, to some extent, she also learned how fun it was to do things my way, which is more spontaneous. Like seeing a route that sounds interesting and following it to see what we could find. We were at the end of our trip and were trying to get home by the end of the following afternoon so that she could have her birthday dinner with her family. I was doing most of the driving anyway, so that evening I decided to get a nap in and then drive through for the rest of the night as she slept. I had no problems and stopped off for another nap midway and got coffee at a dope coffee stand in the middle of nowhere in Oregon that was somehow open at 3 a.m. It was about 5 a.m., and I see a sign from the highway that says, "Historic Covered Bridge, next exit." Sweet, I could use a break and some fresh air, I thought. I got off at the next exit and followed this little road to find the bridge, which was only wide enough for one car at a time. I drove through it, realized I'd have to turn back around at some point, flipped and did a U-turn on the road, and drove right back through it. I pulled over into the gravel lot away up the road. My friend was still sleeping, so I just turned the car off, rolled my window down, and left my keys in the engine. I walked down to the bridge and noticed there was one of those info signs. So, I was reading it, and it mentioned something about early settlers or something. I can't really remember much, but it also explained the name was Grave Creek because a girl from a party had died there or been buried there, something like that. I think she got sick and died there, so they named the creek for her. It was super quiet that early in the morning, where the sun is starting to come up, but everything feels like it's still whispering, like when you're camping and wake up too early. It was peaceful, quiet, and I was enjoying my break of fresh air with a bit of history. I had a rock in my shoe, so I leaned against the little white fence that separated me from the bridge and removed the shoe. Mid-tending to my foot, I happened to look up, and this woman was literally crawling from under the bridge. I kid you not. It felt like my whole body was full of adrenaline, and everything within me was screaming to get the hell out of there. So for context, I'm a tall and strong woman, always have been, and people don't usually try to do anything to me because I can obviously hold my own. As a result, I hardly ever get intimidated by strangers, and definitely don't get intimidated by other women. But guys, I kid you not, that I was terrified and can't even give you a good reason why. This woman, who crawled up a muddy hillside from the creek under the bridge, was 1. Bold, and 2. Immaculately clean from having just crawled under a bridge, and 3. Wearing a strapless sundress. She also had the biggest eyes I've ever seen, and she wouldn't stop smiling. She looked a bit like the Cheshire Cat. I didn't get it. So back to the story. At this point, she's standing about 2 meters away from me. I'm having a full-blown panic attack, like I want to scream and run on the inside, but tried to play it cool because I'm like, is she a hiker, homeless, a druggie? There's too much about her, well at first glance, that doesn't add up. And I think I was extra anxious because she pretty much snuck up on me. I know my friend is still asleep, and the car is a good way down the road, so I decide to play it cool and panic to myself. Mind you, I had my shoe off too, so my brilliant idea to play it cool was, let me put my shoe back on and take off the other one so she doesn't think anything is up, right? So here I am now, dusting non-existent rocks from my other shoe while she's telling me something about her life story. All I remember her saying is that her mom and her used to come out here all the time, and now her mom has passed. She asked if I had any money. I lied, and said that I used the last of my cash at a gas station a while back, and I told her that I was on the road with my friend, and would be home today. Finally, I put on my other shoe and say, I think I should be getting back to my friend, and calmly and casually make my break for it. And when I think I'm in the clear because she says bye and starts to head in the other direction on the road, I'm now at a safe distance, so I turn my back and walk a bit faster to the car. When I hear her voice behind me, asking if I can have a cigarette, I turn around to answer her and realize, like in the 10 to 15 seconds that I had my back to her, she had started walking backward towards me, then got very close to me. I double panicked. I tell her no, that neither of us smoke, and she says, oh, that's good. It's bad for your health anyway. And I'm just like, nope, 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 get me out of here. She turns back to the other side of the road, and I get into the car. I have never in my life turned on a car, locked the doors, rolled the windows up, and whipped it into gear faster than I did. My friend had still been sleeping, and woke abruptly at me getting back in. I didn't tell her what was going on. I just started driving. This chick was still standing by the side of the road, grinning her ass off, staring at me. It was the most scared I've ever been in my entire life. As far as I know, she didn't have a weapon or anything like that, but everything about her was unnerving and wrong. My friend dozed back off while I spent the next 2 hours driving. My whole body was trembling. She woke up around 7 o'clock and offered to take over, so we swapped. I told her then what happened, and she looked shocked. Apparently she had woken up a bit when she was alone in the car and looked back and saw me but didn't realize I was with someone. I would have to ask her because it's been a few years now. I can't remember if she saw the lady as I drove away or if she didn't see her at all. To be fair, her chair was very reclined, and she was sleeping pretty heavily. But she was really surprised when she realized how shook up I was, even hours after. All in all, it took me about 5 hours to get calm, and I spent the next year lightweight paranoid that that girl would somehow show up again. I'm actually still kind of scared of it. My mom lives up in Washington, so sometimes I do travel through that area, and I'm just thinking, please, never again. Needless to say, I elect not to drive that much through Oregon, nor see its covered bridges with creepy-ass bald chicks and sundresses beneath them. I was hiking and backpacking with 2 friends in Montana. We were probably 5 miles from the nearest paved road and had hiked around 2 miles from the end of the dirt road. The spot isn't very well traveled and is quite nondescript, but we all enjoyed getting away from any crowds and being out relatively alone, so we always gravitated to areas like this for backcountry camping. We made a fire and hung out, then piled into our tent. All was normal, and we hadn't seen a soul or any recent sign of people since we left the paved roads. I have some trouble sleeping and was sort of just laying there for maybe 30 minutes, and both my buddies passed out. That's when it got weird. I heard from my side of the tent a murmur, which I was certain was a person making sounds underneath their breath. It didn't feel like real words, but almost like someone drunk was mumbling gibberish. My first thought was one of my buddies was sleep-talking. I listened closer, and it was definitely coming from outside. I woke up my friend closest to me, and he woke me up with a "what?" a little irritated, and at that moment, the muttering stopped. I shooed him and whispered to him what I'd heard. We waited a second, and it started again, but it seemed closer this time, and he heard it too, but we didn't hear any movement. I can still hear the voice, and it really messes with me 10 years later. He gave me a "what the hell" face and proceeded to gesture that he was going to unzip the door and see what was outside. Right as he starts moving the zipper, we heard what sounded like someone taking a huge gasp of air before diving into a pool, seemingly from the opposite side of the tent of where we heard the original muttering from. We both froze for a second before he pushed his flashlight out and looked in that direction and screamed, "Who's out there?" We didn't see anything and never heard a single twig with a sound of movement. But this time, my other friend had woken up, and we were all still freaking out. We told him what was up, and we all took our flashlights to see what the hell it was, and we saw nothing at all. We were both up for a long time after that, while the sleeping friend was out again fairly shortly thereafter. We didn't hear another odd sound at all, and in the morning, there were no signs that anyone had been there. We cut our trip to just that night and moved back to a campground the following day. We still have no idea what or who was outside our tent. The only thing that we could even make a semblance of sense of was an owl, bat, or another bird. But I've spent many nights outdoors in that habitat, and I am familiar with those noises. This was entirely different in my opinion, and didn't come from any animal I'm aware of. Anyway, it still gives me chills thinking about it. I worked at a forensic state facility that housed mentally disabled men who were unable to stand trial. My shift was from 9:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. I thought it was funny that a lot of my coworkers were into the ghost stories, but I learned real quick that all you could do was laugh at things you couldn't explain. One night, I was sitting in a chair in the doorway of my one-to-one client. His room was the last room of the hallway near the exit door, so it was dark on that side of the hall when the lights were off. I had seen a dark sort of figure under the exit sign that was placed above the exit door. I stared at it for about a minute, trying to register what I was actually seeing before I could get through my head that this was something unusual. The figure rushed towards me, causing me to jump and fall out of my chair. I laughed because I thought I looked silly on camera, as there were cameras covering every inch of the hallway. I also joked with other co-workers, saying I was part of the ghost story gang. That same night, I was in the chart room at around 4:30 a.m. to file observation notes of the residents in the chart book. The books were really heavy and weren't easy to tote around. After I filled all the charts, as we had 12 residents on my hall, and put the books back on the shelf, they flew off the shelf as if they were being thrown and landed in the middle of the room. At that time, I was more upset than concerned because it was a long and hellish night, and I had to just put those books up. There were other instances when I had seen things I couldn't explain. One instance was when I had seen a headless figure standing at the end of the hallway, the same spot where I had seen that shadow. I thought it was a resident at first because he was wearing a white t-shirt, blue basketball shorts, and white sneakers. He resembled another resident who lived on a different hall, as he was the only individual on campus that was close to 7 foot and nearly 400 pounds. I walked towards it, calling the individual's name, but got no reaction from the figure. I looked down to get my brake key from my pocket because I thought the resident needed something to drink, and we often had the good stuff. When I looked up, the figure was gone. There were other times when the shadows would be out, and I noticed it was usually when our residents were asleep in the room. Most of the night, I told my new co-worker about all I've seen on my haul, and she laughed, saying I was just as crazy as the other people on the night shift. The next night, after that conversation, she was to work a shift on her own. Now, after that night, she demanded to be moved to another location. I was curious about her transfer and went to read the observation and hall notes from the last night she worked. It said, 4:30 a.m., all residents asleep in their beds throughout the night. I guess they didn't like the new girl's sense of humor. My father had been dating this girl for a while, and things were going great. She met us a few times and got along great with my sister and me. Eventually, my father asked her to move in with us. She drove 7 hours to move in and brought along her 2 cats. Things were great for the first 2 months until she couldn't find a job. They had agreed that she would apply for jobs and have one secured for an interview before she moved in. She moved in on July 2nd and still didn't have a job until late January. I, being fresh out of high school with no experience in a job setting, was able to get a job before her. This caused my father to have to cover her car payments and insurance, which set us back financially. Then October came with the discovery of 4 years' worth of text messages between her and a friend of hers named Jared. All the messages were taking place after my father and her were dating, and while she was still living in her hometown. These text messages were laced with him coming over and engaging in inappropriate behavior. My father confronted her about it, and she denied it, saying we just didn't understand her friendships. My father let it go as they hadn't messaged each other in weeks. Small arguments continued to pop up, and she started sneaking money out of my dad's wallet at night to buy cigarettes. This may only sound like small amounts, but it was a nightly occurrence, and it set us back financially as well. These arguments mainly consisted of her lying about something and not admitting it, or her doing something stupid and not apologizing. Things got worse as Christmas came. My father expressed that he didn't love her anymore, and that she needed to work to fix the relationship if she wanted to continue. This meant really trying to get a job and not lying about everything. She agreed that she would, but I advised him against giving her the option. I was tired of this and wanted her out. She began lying more and more, causing more problems. We believe she started taking some sort of drug as she would come back from a drive shaking and spazzing out, spouting nonsense. She even came after myself and a friend of mine during one of their arguments, to which my father responded, "Pack your stuff and get out. How dare you go after my kids?" Telling her to get out and leave was a regular occurrence in their fights, but she never took the hint. She was emotionally abusive to everyone in the household, especially my father, reducing him to tears. When he found out she had been receiving $1,000 a month from her mother, which would have had us staying up to date on rent payments, we have no idea what she did with the money. No matter the situation, she would try to twist it so that she would be the victim, even calling my father and asking for second opinions. The party of persecuting Martha, nothing was ever her fault, and it was always a misunderstanding. When I was 18, me and my friends took a road trip about 7 hours or so down to Apalachicola Forest near Tallahassee, Florida. We were going to do a little car camping, drinking a few ice-cold native lights, 18-year-old stuff. As we didn't want to be bothered by any park rangers, we drove way deep into the woods. We got there, set up camp, and it sent an 80 lights. Me and a guy decided to do a little exploring, so we walked about 100 yards from our site back to the main road, so another path directly across from us, and started walking. Immediately we started seeing signs that someone had been living there for a while. Big bags of trash, stuff like that. I should have seen a huge red flag and turned around, but I'm 18 and nothing can hurt me. So we get to this campsite of an older white guy living out of his van, clothesline strung up, and a big gorgeous dog, which I think was a golden retriever. We tried to back out, but he sees us and starts up a conversation. He's friendly enough and asks us where we're from, and he tells us some cool spots to check out. We ended up chatting to him for about 10 minutes, and then we went on our way. I kept thinking how odd it was that he gave directions and steps, not yards or miles. The guy seemed to be off balance, not stumbling drunk, but like he was walking on a balance beam, swaying side to side. Oh, and he was super excited to talk about national parks and forests and where we were from. So we went back to our tents. Fast forward 2 months, the same buddy calls me late at night and tells me to turn on the TV to the news. I obliged, and I see an old dude with a van. You see where this is heading, but I didn't. So I get pissed at my friend for waking me, and he insists that I should watch. And when I see the golden retriever, it all clicks. The man's name was Gary Michael Hilton, convicted of at least 4 murders. He kidnapped and murdered a girl on Blood Mountain, Georgia, an older couple in Pisgah, North Carolina, and a girl in Apalachicola at the campsite not long after we left. Yes, the very same places he had been talking to us about. Obviously, we called the cops, and they put us in touch with the FBI. We get flown down to take investigators to the campsite, point out every spot we saw, and tell them exactly what he told us, and show them the places he described to us. I didn't find out until after the trial, but apparently they found what appeared to be partially destroyed human finger bones in an area near the site, and I had to be flown down again to testify. This was 5 years ago. My good friends and I were about 15 years of age, doing what kids do. We snuck out every weekend and had older friends in high school to drive us places. In this particular situation, we decided to check out this 8th floor abandoned hospital 10 minutes away from our city. It was 8 a.m., and one of the worst winters in Michigan we had seen in the past 12 years. It was at least -15 with wind chill because the hospital was less than 200 feet from the Detroit River. So my friends and I arrived, trying not to draw attention because we didn't want police attention. We jumped a 6-foot brick wall, only to fall into the courtyard, which had easily 5 feet of unshoveled snow. So we trudged through it to the only entrance of the hospital, which is a back door with a staircase that goes up and down to the basement. Every other door was chained or barricaded, so we made entry and immediately saw satanic worshipping symbols on the walls in red spray paint. There was some type of sacrificed animal, which was far too mutilated to even tell what it was. But judging by the size, I'd guess it could have been a small dog. At this point, my 4 friends and I were disgusted, horrified, and a little bit pissed off. 2 of my friends go down to the basement while me and the other 2 go upstairs, flashlights in tote. We all kept seeing silhouettes moving across the hallway in front of us, but always from a distance, so we brushed it off for the moment. But then we had a medical desk tip over in the room down the hall from us, which sent items flying out of the room into the hall. We ran so fast, not knowing if it was a bomb or a demon. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, my other 2 friends in the basement of the hospital had found the room where they stored all the hospital beds and swore that something was thrown right at them. They were certain they found the morgue, and they just had to check it out because there was something that they had to see. So, as we moved down the stairs, I kept hearing faint singing, but as if it were a little girl. So, I kept thinking my friend behind me was being a smartass. "Stop it, John. Thought it was you," he replies. So we stopped in unison, and all of us hear what sounds like a little girl humming a song, but it wasn't further than a few flights of stairs above us. We all said, "Screw it," ran out of the building, hopped the wall, and left. Since then, we have tried to return, but they have picked up police patrols in the area, so it would have been far too risky. I had been sent to Korea from my university a few years ago. They told me for my major I had to go somewhere in Asia, and my friend had really talked up Korea for me. I knew nothing about it, but I decided, what the hell, and embarked on a semester-long trip. I had only one serious boyfriend in my life, who I had broken up with a few months prior. I also don't enjoy one-night stands, and wasn't digging the dudes at the clubs in Seoul, but I still wanted to have some sort of romantic experience. So, my friend recommended I use this dating app to meet English-speaking Koreans. That way, I could meet someone and experience the actual dating culture. I thought, I'm young, why not? I was just so eager to have the new experience. Maybe it sounds dumb to try dating in a foreign country, but it worked out for me eventually, just not the first date. I met him on a dating app after being in Seoul for 3 weeks. We'll call him Tim. I still didn't know the culture or city very well and was a bit naive about everything. He eagerly wanted to meet for a date after talking to me, and he seemed nice. I should have asked more questions, and I should have noticed that he was not giving me many details about himself. Tim was a guy a little older than me, but claimed he was a college student. I assumed he had done his military time, which all men in Korea have to do, and returned to school. We talked for a bit, and decided to meet for a tea date near the school I went to. He wanted to come to my dorm originally to pick me up, but I live in an all-women's dorm, and didn't want him to know exactly where I lived since we were still strangers. So instead, I insisted we meet at the main town center near the subway. He really didn't like this idea, which looking back was a red flag. But eventually, I insisted. The night of the date, I waited an hour for this guy. He was very late. Tim weirdly claimed he just wanted to make me wait. I thought he was kidding and messaged him a laughing emoji, assuming he was just lost. When he finally arrived, he was much smaller than I thought, but a man's height has never been something I care about much. He was also quite thin. Maybe I let my guard down because I didn't see him as physically threatening to me, which was a mistake in the end. Right off the bat, he was way too touchy with me and breathed creepy and heavy. I was so put off by his demeanor. I'm usually very tolerant with different personality types, but this was very on to me. I had been told the Korean man would be polite and not so touchy on the first date. He was also addressed oddly, like in business attire for a date, but I thought that maybe it was just a Korean thing. The first thing he said to me was, "You're not as white as I thought you were." I thought this was a translation error, that his English was near perfect, so I asked for clarification, and he said, what he meant was, "I thought you would be more white. Your skin is darker, and your eyes aren't green. That you pure European." Now, I was officially weirded out. First of all, I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm Irish and Scandinavian, so white as hell, basically. So the fact he thought I could have possibly been any whiter was funny. And why did he care in the first place? Anyway, why does my skin color matter to this guy? And why is he bringing it up? He said it about 3 times on the date, how he wished I had green eyes. And every time I would just reply, well, maybe my online photos make me look brighter, and brushed it off as him being nervous and trying to start a conversation. Isn't it funny the dumb excuses you make for people when you're panicked? When we arrived at the tea place, I tried to order a basic raspberry tea, and he stopped me and told me I had to have this special tea. I thought it was weird he wanted to choose my tea for me, but in my head, I brushed it off once again. He really insisted I drink only this type of tea, and I just agreed. These small details became weirder later. After tea, he asked if we could look around my school. It was dark, but the school is very well lit, so I agreed. The whole time we walked around, he would randomly stop and grab me for long hugs. The first time I let it happen, but then I stopped him, and he continued trying. He kept grabbing me and breathing hard into my neck. It was so awkward. He also wouldn't tell me any personal details about himself. I asked so many questions, desperately trying to distract from all the awkward grabbing and to try and get to know him, but he would never tell me anything. He even said at one point, "I am a mysterious man," like a movie line. He also said something like, "You look so much like my favorite movie character." I asked him who that would be, but he said that I would need to figure it out on my own. Finally, he said, "I want to go to a dark area," and in my head I screamed, "Hell no!" At this point, I wanted the date to be over fast. He somehow knew there was a wooded area behind my campus, and he said that we should go there. I said no, and that I wanted to stay near the main campus in town, but he kept pushing. Finally, he grabbed my arm and started dragging me there. He said, "I can't let anyone see," and I started to panic. I finally ripped my arm away and just demanded we leave and go back to the main road immediately. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't ask for help or get angry. Maybe I was scared, but I just began to book it back to the main road, and he followed. We ended up in front of a hospital near the town center, and I told him it was time for him to go. I made some excuse, and he was pleading with me to stay. I told him, and lied, that we could meet the next day and that I would message him. I just wanted to get away at this point. I was pretending everything was fine in order for him to go. Suddenly, I think he's leaning in to kiss me, and I immediately think, "Oh God, no." But it was so much worse. Instead, I feel pain in my face. It takes me a second to realize he was biting my face. It was like a dog. I had never felt the sensation before. He leaned his head sideways and bit me on my nose and cheek as hard as he could. I screamed and pushed him away. His face looked so freaky that I barely had any time to react in words. Instead, I ran up the sidewalk until I saw a convenience store on the right, ran into the back of the store, and bent down and started to cry. The man who owned the store started to yell at me, but I couldn't explain my situation. I just begged him in English to let me stay, and I ended up having to buy a popsicle to stick around. God, I wish I had learned some Korean by then. I guess Tim didn't follow me. I peered outside the store and didn't see him. I texted a friend and waited for them to get me to take me back to my dorm. On the way, I messaged him and basically told him to stay away from me. I told him he was a creep and that he shouldn't bite women, and something along the lines of me calling the police, and then I blocked him. I was so scared to walk around my school area after that. I was so afraid he would find me somehow, and I'm so thankful I never let him pick me up at my dorm. I called my mom to tell her what happened when suddenly she said, "Wait, what did he ask you?" She then put some details together and realized all of these weird things had to do with the 50 Shades of Grey books. At first, I thought she was just being silly and overthinking a bad date. I thought she was joking, but oh God, she was right. She'd recently seen the movie or read the book. The eye color, the way he dressed, the tea he made me drink, and the random lines he said. It all matched the books and movies for his dirty little fantasy. My mom thinks he picked me because I look like the girl from the movie to him. It explains why he was so fixated on my appearance and his whole thing with the biting and trying to dominate me. Even if it wasn't his intention, I later learned that there are a few creeps who seek out foreign girls to dominate and sleep with as a prize. They call it riding the white horse or something along those lines. On a happier note, this bad experience didn't stop me. I eventually met someone else in Korea, and we ended up falling in love. We even did the whole long-distance thing, and now I'm living in Korea, studying and working, hoping to marry soon. So I guess I didn't let bad, creepy guys stop my life. As for Tim, let's not meet. It's been years, but I will still kick your ass if I see you, and I won't have to bite. Hey there. Hope you enjoyed these stories. If you can, please like and subscribe. I would appreciate it. See you next time.